Okay. I should have mentioned that. My fault. I've had a problem for 30 or 40 years. I saw it in the Ramban, and it's based on other sources as well, a certain idea, and I could not understand what it meant. I asked a number of people about it. I didn't get any satisfaction. And the idea is this. The mitzvos are divided into, in a certain sense, positive and negative. There are mitzvos to do, and there are mitzvos which tell you that you should refrain from doing things. Like the mitzvah to eat matzah, to give charity, or to pursue justice. As a mitzvah not to eat pork, and not to violate Shabbos, and not to hurt other people with words. And there are two basic modes of relating to the Creator. One is love, and one is fear and awe. And they pair off. Love is connected to the positive mitzvos, and fear and awe are connected to the negative mitzvos. That's the way the Ramban puts it, although I'm being a little vague. And when I heard that, I thought to myself, let's see, if I love someone, well, definitely I would like to do what he would want me to do. I would like to do what would please him. But wouldn't it also be, if I love him, that if something would hurt him or something goes against what he wants, I wouldn't do it? Wouldn't love motivate me also to fulfill the negative commandments? And vice versa. Suppose I'm afraid of someone, or I have awe for the person. Yeah, it's true. If he forbade something, I would be very strongly motivated not to violate that prohibition. But if I knew that he wanted something, that he felt that something was important, wouldn't I be motivated because I was afraid of him, because I had offered him to do positively the things that he wants done? Isn't it true that love would motivate both kinds of commandments, and also fear and awe would motivate both kinds of commandments? Why does Ramban say they're paired off this way? As I say, I asked many people this question, and I didn't get something which I could understand. I'm starting out to learn the Sefer Tanya, which I learned several times in my lifetime and couldn't make head and tail of it. I really couldn't understand it at all. And I've decided to try it a fourth time. I have a very, very good chavusa, and there's a wonderful edition that came out from Pe'er Mikadoshim, which is a Gerer publishing house, where they did a magnificent job of presenting it. So we're starting to work on it, and he mentions this. And he says that love is the real basis, amiti, the real basis of positive commandments, and fear and awe are the real basis of the negative commandments. Now, if you learn to read our literature, you hear the word real and you think, aha. So there could be other bases, there could be other foundations, there could be other platforms, and this one somehow qualifies for the title real. And he says the following: you have to ask, why did HaKadosh Baruch Hu create these commandments? What was his purpose in creating them? What did he want to accomplish through them? And he says the positive commandments are designed to enable a person to relate to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, to dedicate himself, and in our terminology, to attach himself, something called dveikus, which means attachment to. It means bonding oneself to HaKadosh Baruch Hu. That's the reason why he made these commandments. Sure, you could be motivated to perform them in a variety of ways, a variety of different characteristics of the psychology of a person that could motivate him to keep them, but that's not what we're talking about. I'm talking about motivation. We're talking about accomplishing through that commandment what HaKadosh Baruch Hu wants accomplished through that commandment. So if what he wants through that commandment is bonding, then it has to come from a motivation to create bonding. And love is that kind of motivation. When you love someone, you want to be close to that person, you want to be related to that person, you want to interact with that person, you want to share with that person. Love motivates the desire to bond, and if the positive commandments are created as a means for bonding. That's why the love becomes the real foundation, the most essential foundation. And if you don't do the positive commandments out of love, you're not enabling them to accomplish what HaKadosh Baruch Hu created them to accomplish. So then you don't have the real foundation. You maybe have both the motivations to do them, and you may be very reliable in doing them, but they're not accomplishing the real thing they're supposed to accomplish. And the same thing is true for the negative commandments. He says that the idea of yira is two different types of yira. One is knowing that he is the king of the world. That is to say, he has legitimate authority to determine what should happen in the world. And then you have a fear of violating that authority. Again, not because you're going to be punished. He doesn't talk about that, but simply it's not right. Or you have yiras haromamus, which means you are aware of his overwhelming greatness, his overwhelming superiority, his overwhelming value, that you feel that to violate that would be to do something that's almost insane. Both of those will hold you back from violating a negative commandment, but they are going to motivate you to attach yourself to him. The contrary, it's a kind of keeping yourself away from violating or contradicting what he is. So that's the source of the negative commandments, to accomplish what the negative commandments were created to accomplish. This now gives a meaning to that statement, which is, I said, is in the Ramban, and it's really based on a Zohar, which I never had before. So one of the things this teaches you is that questions are precious. Don't let questions bother you. If you have a question and you don't have an answer to it, hold on to it. Hold on to it. I can testify that if you have a good memory and you're patient, the tradition is a very, very rich resource. It's also very big. So it may take time to come in contact with that portion of the tradition which will give it to you. And the answers are often quite surprising. The reason I didn't think of myself is because I wouldn't have dreamt of it. I don't have that kind of creativity and imagination to dream of it, and not to be frightened by it. I have a question I can't answer, something must be wrong. Yeah, something must be wrong with me because I haven't gotten the answer yet, and that thing that's wrong with me will be fixed eventually, and I will get the answer to it. That's what I just want to share with you. Okay, so today's Q&A. We have dedicated 2 days a week, Sundays and Mondays, to open Q&A on the grounds that people sometimes have unanswered questions, partly because you're listening to a lecture, and you think about it, you write down some notes, and then a week later you think about it again, and something seems odd. But then by that time, the class has gone on to another subject, so you feel sometimes a little hesitant to bring up a question from last week, and so forth and so on. There should be times for open Q&A where people can ask whatever they want. Rabbi Breitowitz also does this, and in superb fashion. So that's what today is open for. Yeah.
This is my situation, but I'm sure it's the situation of others. For the working person, what is your prescription of mandatory texts to study? Let's say if they have an average of 2 hours a day, to make sure to not, forsake the obligation.
That's very interesting. What would I suggest for a person who's working and he needs to work, and he has 2 hours a day to study? What should he study? Now, this is not going to be a one-size-fits-all answer because it'll depend upon how much does he already know and what are his intellectual strengths. Will determine what kind of literature he should spend his time on. Usually, we divide up education into two dimensions. One is acquiring new information, even new understanding. And the second is acquiring new educational capabilities. Not just information, but the ability to learn things which you didn't have before. Usually, acquiring new educational abilities necessitates consistent, determined effort over time. If a person's working and he's got 2 hours a day to learn, it's unlikely he's going to be able to acquire for himself new educational capabilities. What he would need to do is use the capabilities that he has in the best fashion possible to gather the information and understanding that he can under those conditions. Now, it'll depend a great deal on what he already knows and what holes he has to fill. It'll depend on how old he is. It'll depend upon how long he is planning to wait before he gets married. All these things are going to make a gigantic difference. There are certain things which I think come first. And again, for the person who already knows them, we go on to something else. But first of all, you need to have basic knowledge of Chumash. And that, I would say, each week you should at least read through the portion of the week. If you do that for a few years, you'll be familiar with most of the contents of that. That's definitely very important. Number two, he has to have knowledge of how to do the things that he has to do. So, whether it's the holidays as they come by, which you need instructions on what needs to be done, and also what to think, what you're experiencing, what's the meaning of the holidays. There's a wonderful set called the Book of Our Heritage. I think it comes out now in a single volume. Yeah, and Bullman, who used to be the mashgiach here in Ohr Somayach, was one who translated into English, which goes through the months of the year, and for each month it tells you what's happening in that month and gives you background for it. It's a wonderful thing to use. If you use it for a year, you'll have a lot of knowledge about what's going on. Basic laws of Shabbos, basic laws of prayer. These are things that a person needs in order to just get through his day and get through his week and his year. So that's definitely a second thing. And the third thing is basic Jewish belief system. Now, the belief system could be explored, for 6 lifetimes, but the basic ideas of the belief system, the basic dynamics of it, there are books on this subject which can be used to know what the system that you are dealing with stands for. There's a lot of terrifically irresponsible talk about these things. You really need to, for example, there's someone who bills himself as a traditional Jew and he happens to be very famous, and he says that religions have 2 dimensions. One is the dimension of belief and one is the dimension of action. And he classifies various religions that way. And he says, Judaism is a religion of right action. Sorry, dead wrong. Judaism is a religion also that requires certain beliefs. And if you fail in certain beliefs, then you're not a member of good standing. And if you reject those beliefs, having heard of them and having thought about them and reject them, then you border on a heretic. So it's simply not true that you could just do the right thing and your inner life is unformed and unstructured. Indeed, if you think about it, your inner life, your beliefs, your commitments, your values, your priorities, your goals, may be the core of who you are. If a person has a bad habit, he doesn't define his identity by the bad habit. Indeed, he defines his identity on the grounds that he identifies it as a bad habit. You know who I am? I'm the one who says this is wrong to do, even though I do it. So to say that Jews would ignore your inner life and prescribe only how you move your arms and legs, that's grotesque. And yet this person who's very famous and who contends that he's portraying Judaism just gets it dead wrong. So these are the kinds of things which you can't take for granted. You really have to look at. These are, I would say, the beginnings of the story. Without these 3 areas, at least a good acquaintance with these 3 areas, getting married would be very risky, and your whole project of living a Jewish life is without foundation. Beyond that, there's more specialized things. Something like learning how to learn Talmud, you've got to be in Yeshiva to do that. Maybe there are exceptions, 1 in 1,000, but it's a very tough job. It's very tough. So to get a foundation of how to learn Talmud, you've got to be in it all the time and thinking about it and talking to other people about it. It's a very, very difficult ability to acquire. That you're not going to get in 2 hours. In fact, there was a fellow who was here 43 years ago. He came because I met him someplace outside of Israel, and he said to me that he had heard about the Talmud and he was setting aside 2 evenings a week, 2 hours an evening, to explore the Talmud to see whether it was valid or not. So I said to him, suppose someone told you he heard about Einstein's theory of general relativity. This guy was a scientist. And he was putting aside 2 hours, 2 evenings a week to understand Einstein's general relativity. What would you tell him? He said, I would tell him, you can't understand it that way. Go to university and spend time on it. It's a very tough subject. So I said, I'm telling you the same thing. You can't understand the Talmud that way. Come to Yeshiva. And he came to Yeshiva. And it changed his life.
Wait, Rabbi, just
Yeah.
quick clarification. The third category, you talking about books like Derech Hashem, that kind of category?
Well, if you could do Derech Hashem, that's gigantic. That's wonderful.
We talking about that category?
That's something like that. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, that's right.
Do you think that Hashem has permitted medical advancement due to and like prolonged life expectancy due to a change in merits of the people throughout the generations?
I hope that I'm mistaken in associating your question with a particular answer. In other words, what would the association be? Because we have more merit, we get more life? It might be that we make so many mistakes, we need more time to correct them. And that's why we get more life. It's not obvious how the association will go. I think it's very difficult to read God's mind and figure out why he wants one thing rather than another. I will tell you something that is said. Starting around 1840, according to our chronological system, there was supposed to be an injection of wisdom into the world. Had we merited it, it would have been wisdom about God. And because we didn't merit it, it became wisdom in the sciences. And, so that means it was a failure that brought it about, not a success that brought it about. I'm just saying these things to preach caution into reading why it happens. That it happens is definitely true, and we should be grateful for the good that it does and critical of the evil that it does. Almost all new facilities that you have, new powers that you have, can be used for good and for evil. So one has to be careful to see both sides of the picture. Yeah.
To continue on to Lenny's question about if you're busy working, if you're a working person and you only have a limited amount of time to study. Say it's a person like somebody like one of us who came to study in Yeshiva for a couple of months, maybe sub year, maybe a year, that they have some Gemara skills. Should they spend any time, their 2 hours a day, not Daf Yomi, that's a lot to take on, but something smaller like, trying to get through a Mishnah of the Gemara or something of this sort, or it's too much to grasp on your own in those 2 hours. So
you see, you gave a couple of possibilities. He's here for 2 months or he's here for a year. Those will be very different. Very different. If you're here for 2 months, then the goal is information and some understanding. You're not going to create new capabilities. Now, how to get your feet wet in Gemara and how to begin the process is controversial. So I'm just telling you that there are ideas other than mine. Mine is different because it's true, and the other ones are not. Okay, I didn't mean exactly that way, but many people feel the following: you really need 2 things, and you sort of put it yourself. One is you need the ability to analyze in depth, and the other is you need information. The ideal in many yeshivas is you take some portion of the day and take a small section of text and work on it really deeply. Really try to work out every aspect or every dimension of it. And simultaneously, spend some part of the day just going through very superficially. Will you misunderstand things? Yeah, you'll also misunderstand them in the depth section also. It's inevitable. In fact, there's a statement in the Talmud, you only come to master a piece of Torah when you've been tripped up by it. So it means you stumble and you fall, you pick yourself up, and then after a while, you get hold of it. So I firmly believe I did this when I started out because I had good guidance in doing both. So if you're spending, let's say, an hour a day doing some Gemara in depth, an hour a day just running, I think in the long term that will give you the most efficient acquaintance of what Gemara is. Okay, yeah.
So first of all, hello, nice to meet you. I'm Ariel, my first day here.
From where?
So my question, it's kind of hard to word, but I'll try, is essentially like over the years I've been like grappling with Judaism and trying to get to a place where I really firmly believe in God and like in the Torah and wanting to do all the mitzvot. And I've gotten to like the first couple steps, I think. But I find myself like struggling with believing incredibly hard in some of the commandments that don't seem as rooted in logic, but more rooted in like not eating pork and the rules of kashrus and Shabbos. I forgot what those are called, but I know a lot of them are like for the purpose serving Hashem or
Chok.
chok. Okay, so like. How do you recommend, or what do you recommend I study, or maybe like a daily practice to do, or a person to talk to like start grounding my belief in those mitzvos?
Oh, you're asking a very important question. This question isn't often asked, but it's a very important question. And it raises an extremely deep issue. Let me approach it a little bit indirectly, and then I think I'll have the background to answer directly what you're asking. Suppose a person says the following. Let's see, there's a mitzvah to honor your parents and treat them with respect. Why is that? Well, listen, your parents brought you into the world. And usually, I would say the vast majority of the time, they've done things to you from which you've benefited tremendously. So you have a tremendous debt of gratitude to them. And since they brought you into the world, this relationship you have with them that you don't have with anybody else. Other people have helped you, and you have debts of gratitude to them also, but the debt of gratitude. So the Torah recognizes this by giving you special responsibilities to your parents, right? That would fit in with the kind of logic that you're talking about. Now, there's a point of view from which this is upside down. It's completely upside down. Think of how these remarks are structured. I'm a person living my life, and I have my reality, my relationships, my opportunities, my sensitivities. What does the Torah do to contribute to my life? I have my life, I have my goals, I have my values, my projects. What does the Torah do to contribute to my life? That means the Torah becomes a kind of handbook of helping people get and do what they need to do. The truth is the exact opposite. And the truth is we're asking the wrong question. The question shouldn't be, what role does your parents, does the mitzvah of honoring your parents play in your life? The question that we should ask is, why do we have parents? Why do we have parents? Why do we reproduce sexually? Why not like an amoeba, just split? Or there are things that grow appendages and they cut off and why do we reproduce this way? And the answer is, there's a mitzvah of honoring your parents, and that's why you have parents. The Torah comes first, and human life comes second. What you really want to do is understand what role I play vis-a-vis the mitzvos, not what role the mitzvos play vis-a-vis fostering and helping my life. Does Shabbos help lower your blood pressure? Well, then you don't have to take medication. That's a great reason to keep Shabbos. No. What am I doing to play the role that the Torah put for Shabbos in the world? The question is on me, not on it. It's entirely backwards. And now when you ask for a reason for a chok, the ultimate reason for a chok is that Kodesh Baruch Hu wanted it, and he wanted it for your betterment. He wanted to give you an opportunity to become what he wants you to become. And if you're smart, you'll want to become what he wants you to become. But the question, as I say, is on me. I'll give you an example of how this works. 1991, I was in mourning for my parents who died 6 months apart. So I was like in mourning for 18 months. There's an encyclopedic compendium of the laws of mourning called the Pnei Baruch. And in there, he asked the following questions. One of the things that a mourner for a parent does is he leads the prayers on the regular days of the week, not Shabbos, not holidays. So he's the Shliach Tzibur, he's the one who leads the prayers. Suppose you are in a synagogue that has lots of mourners, 18 of them. And there are 18 prayers a week that need a leader. And let's say you have the number one to choose, one of the 18 that you should be the leader. Which of the 18 prayers, 6 days, 3 a day, should you choose as the most precious one to be the leader of the congregation? So if you haven't heard the answer, then I think you'd never, ever guess the answer. The answer is the evening prayer Saturday evening. Mariv Motzei Shabbos. Golly, there's no Kedusha, and there's no reading of the Torah, and there aren't 5 Kadeshim and so on and so on. Why would that be? And the answer is because the soul of that person who died is being judged. Shabbos, there's no judgment. And Motzei Shabbos, the soul is going back into the condition of judgment. And when it's going into that condition, a mitzvah done in its name has maximum effect on that soul. So what I do here is determined by the effect it has there. And that's the way I have to look. Not what does it do for me in my blood pressure, or what does it do for me in my relationships, or what does it do for me in my concentration or nobility. No, what do I do for it? I'm acting for that, which is more important than I am. Ramchal, Sato, and the Way of God, and other places, everything depends upon what's going on there. This world is a reflection of that world. That world is more real than this world. So you don't judge that world by this one, you judge this one by that one. So that I think is the depth answer to what you're saying. So then you don't want a law by law justification. Yeah, this will increase your bank account. Oh, right, that's a good one. Check it off. What you want is an understanding of your general relationship to HaKadosh Baruch Hu, what He wants from the world, what He wants from you, and you see these now as strategies to accomplish what He wants done. It's a revolutionary way of thinking about it.
Yeah, flips it.
Now, it's true that some of our literature does do what you mentioned. And it's also true, but it's not fundamental. It's superficial. And the deeper way is doing it that way.
Can I ask a follow-up to that?
I guess so, yeah.
Okay, so because I think we a lot of hopefully have a sense of the physical right and wrong. Like I know not to steal because I just feel it's like on a deep level you have that moral sense. But do you recommend any are there any daily practices or books to read to almost develop that sense of doing what you said, doing right by the spiritual world? Because
I don't think you can develop a sense like that directly, but I think you could sort of use your imagination to grow beyond just that sort of thing. For example, it seems to me people understand very well. Take the slums of Buenos Aires. Let's take a kid who's growing up there. That kid could be Beethoven. But he hasn't got schooling. He hasn't got leisure. He hasn't got teachers. He's surrounded by drugs. He's surrounded by gangs and so forth and so on. Don't you feel a kind of loss there? A kind of pity? Look what he could have become. That's not just not stealing. That's looking at human potential for greatness, and asking, I'm feeling that it's important to develop that potential for greatness. That's a stepping stone. Then you have to say, well, what is greatness? What counts as greatness? Beethoven created great music. Okay, that's something. Some people created great moral systems. Some people created an image of noble living. When you find out, for example, Walter Reed, you've heard of the Walter Reed Hospital in Washington, he was convinced that yellow fever was carried by mosquitoes, and people didn't believe him, didn't buy it. So he publicly infected himself with yellow fever. It didn't do that mosquito. He could have died. He convinced people that it was carried by mosquitoes. And then there was a campaign to wipe out the breeding grounds of mosquitoes. Who knows how many thousands of lives were saved. His attitude was, saving lives is more important than the risk of my life. Well, that's a much higher example than someone who puts balls in a hoop, or who tells how the violins how to play. So you're looking for things which aren't just don't steal and don't, but living for something that's great. Now you have to understand that HaKadosh Baruch Hu planned our world and planned our way of life to live for that which there is no greater. That's the general idea. Yeah.
So it's kind of a two-part question, but I think they both relate to each other. When it comes to davening, I know there's a concept that you're supposed to say the words out loud, and I've heard that you actually need to say the words out loud to be yotzei davening, to actually fulfill davening. We were actually just learning with Rav Matalon that when a person's davening, they should envision the shapes of the letters when you're saying it. I think there's a lot of power to it, but when a person is growing in their Judaism, the idea that, if you're davening in your head, what you just did doesn't count, does not seem correct to me. And, when I was, on my journey back towards Judaism, and I kind of was first starting to think, okay, maybe there's something here, maybe I want to come back. I didn't immediately just take on kosher all at once, and now I'm not going to go and spend time with my friends who are eating non-kosher. Like, I don't know what I don't even know what I believe. At the time, I had this conviction that there's no way God wants me after this one inspiring Shabbos to go back home and just suddenly keep all halachos. So I'm going to keep some halachos, like when I'm on my own, I'm going to try to keep kosher, and when I'm with friends, I'll keep non-kosher, and I don't even consider that to be violating anything. And I sort of viewed the Torah, and I still kind of view it this way, in that obviously once a person gets to a level, you are keeping all mitzvos, you are keeping all the ases and loses, but as you're growing, they're there for you to grow into and guide, and there's spiritual power to them, but the spiritual power isn't going to take effect in someone who isn't ready for it yet, I don't think, although we're talking about maybe you should take these things on, because you understand there's a greater system. And then, the second part, which is related, is also the idea that we have these, all these punishments for the averos that a person does, and that a person is chayav misa, they're chayav skila, they break Shabbos. And I also had come to understand that, there's categories in terms of, we have categories of punishments, of capital punishments, all kinds of punishments, and there's symbolism there that's trying to tell you what the problem with this sin is. But the idea isn't that we actually are supposed to go out and actively kill a person. So my question is, when we say you're not yotzei davening, when you don't fulfill davening, do we really mean that? And similarly by different kinds of punishments, do we really mean that you're not supposed to, that we actually will kill someone if they light a fire on Shabbos?
Okay, I count there are about 7 questions, and I'll try to say something about at least some of them. First of all, perhaps most prominently, a person would only incur the death penalty if the violation was witnessed and if he was warned before his action that what you're doing is forbidden and carries a death penalty, and he responds, I know and I'm doing it anyway. Now let's picture the state of mind of such a person. Poor Ruvain, he wants a cigarette Saturday afternoon. Takes out his cigarette, his lighter. Shimon and Levi come around the corner. Ruvain, it's Shabbos. It's a capital crime. If he wants the cigarette, what's he going to do? He's going to say, oh, I forgot. Thanks, guys. Oh, you saved me. Oh, that's terrific. Have a wonderful Shabbos. Bye. And when they go around the corner, he'll light up a cigarette. That's if he wants a cigarette. Why would he say, yeah, I know. Yeah, Shabbos, in your face. I'm doing it anyway. Why would he do that? Because he wants a cigarette? I don't think so. He wants a public anti-Shabbos demonstration. That's what he wants. And that's what capital punishment is for. You can't hide witnesses behind the bushes and watch him violate Shabbos and give him a capital punishment. That doesn't work. There's got to be witnesses that warn him, or he hears the warning from somebody else, and he says, even so, I'm going to do it. So that changes the whole idea of what the capital punishment is for, number one. Number two, you're absolutely right that it's meant to be a system you grow into. It is not meant to be a system in which you simply hear about the right thing to do and do it immediately. There are many proofs of this, but the one that is very poignant, I think, is the Rambam. And Rambam writes that character traits, many, if not all, are organized on a continuum. There's a certain quality, and there's too much and too little, which are 2 different character traits, and then there's some kind of median range in which you have the appropriate character trait. And the too much and too little are both bad, and only the median is, okay, then there are exceptions and qualifications. It's a very complicated subject, but that's the general idea. Now the Rambam says, suppose you find yourself in one of the bad positions. Let's say too much. And you know that you don't belong there. And you know that you have to really move towards the middle, towards the median. Well, how do you do that? And the Rambam says, here's how you do it. First, you move from too much to too little, to the opposite extreme. You're going from bad to bad. And then you move gradually into the middle. What do you mean you go from bad to bad? Why not just go to the middle where it's good? Why can't you just do what you have to do? Because you can't do it. You're not psychologically structured in such a way that you can do it. Obviously, this means it takes time. It has to be, you have to grow into it. So there are other such characteristics as well. Kodesh Baruch Hu understands that you are limited in the things that you do, and that being the case, he understands it will take time for you to grow into them. That's certainly true. A third thing, you mentioned about prayer. Now, you have to be very careful here. Just take the way you said it. If you do it only in your head, then you haven't satisfied the mitzvah of prayer. That doesn't mean you've done nothing. That doesn't mean what you've done is worthless. It doesn't mean that it isn't even good. It just hasn't satisfied this particular law. Meditating on God and thinking about God and relating to God mentally is certainly appropriate. It's certainly praiseworthy. It's certainly something for which a person will be rewarded. It's just that, in addition to all that, God has a mitzvah of prayer also, and because He's prescribed it as a mitzvah, it's something that you also need. And if you haven't done it, then you haven't done that thing that you also need. But don't have the attitude of all or nothing. If you didn't do this, you didn't do anything. On the contrary, it's certainly true. Now, you said it in a certain way, which I hope is just a sort of slip of the tongue. You're not supposed to say it out loud. Say it out loud makes it sound like it can be heard.
Under their breath.
Okay, but that's not saying it out loud. So I'm saying it because there are other people in the room, and you said it, and I'm afraid that people are going to be misled.
Right.
That's pretty well agreed upon. Yeshivat Ohr brings it, that no one else should be able to hear you say what you say. It's even questionable whether you should be able to hear what you say. My Rabbi told us, on the basis of the base Yosef, that you shouldn't even hear it yourself. There are differences of opinion, but for sure nobody else should be able to hear it. So it's a matter of pronouncing, saying rather than just thinking. And if I'm not mistaken, there are no texts where there's specific mitzvah to meditate on them. When we are to express certain texts, it's always a mitzvah to pronounce them. Whether it's the Shema or prayer or vidui, confession, it's a question of pronouncing the words. Making the words, rather than just thinking the words, is a very important aspect of how you deal with text, how you relate to text. Well, that is a whole story, a whole deep thing I'm not going to go to the present time, but that's something just to keep in mind. I think that covers at least most of what you
I think
had.
I covered everything. I will just say, to make it memorable, in that one of the biggest things that I've been working on is not getting outraged at people who daven out loud. So you shouldn't daven out loud, or I'll get mad at you.
I was actually just about to ask something right along those lines. That if you're supposed to daven where to say the words but not in a tone, not in a
Hold on a second. I may be have spoken in a way to create a misunderstanding. I was only talking about the Amidah, the silent prayer. That's why it's called the silent prayer. How about that, guys? Right? It's written right there in the center. This is the silent prayer. Hey, right. I'm not talking about saying Ashrei. I'm not talking about singing Lachadodi. Those all can, and many would say should be said out loud. And if you go into real congregations, when they're saying Ashrei, everybody's saying it out loud. And everybody's saying it, it's, decisively out loud. I'm just talking about the silent shemone esre. Sorry, go ahead.
No, that
Okay, I was afraid I made a mistake there. Yeah.
Why can't we say it out loud?
One reason that's brought is you'll disturb somebody else's concentration.
But why specifically the
What?
Amida?
You know who we learned this from? We learned this from Hannah, who prayed in the temple, and the high priest thought that she was drunk because he couldn't hear any of her words, and he accused her of being drunk, and she said, "Please, no, I'm just bitter of spirit because of the position that the Kodesh Baruch Hu has put me in, and I'm expressing my pain." And so then we learned from her that it should be solid. Well, one thing is that in the shemone esre, you add in personal requests. and there's no reason for anybody else to hear that. You could. That's a good question. Why would that be? Why would that specifically be silent?
Rabbi, I heard the explanation from a rabbi. I can't remember which rabbi here said it.
Yeah.
Said that you're supposed to have the belief that Hashem can hear you even when you're not speaking out loud, which is why you whisper it, but not enough for anyone else or yourself to even quite hear.
Okay, so now here, this is very interesting because it means that in the Amidah, you're speaking to him. Where in the other parts of what's written in the prayer book, which aren't really prayer, right? You're not speaking to him, you're describing him. Typically, you're not talking to him. So, although sometimes you are, but most of the time you're not. So then, here where you're specifically addressing him, to say it silently would have that effect. That's a very interesting observation. I can't believe that's all there is to it, but that's a very fundamental question. I haven't thought about it before. What is the idea that in the Amidah should be said silently? I could push it just a little bit further. In other words, when you're saying out loud, like we say Ashrei, or you're singing Lachadodi, it becomes like a group effort. And each one's words affect the other one. If a person says it with excitement, then it affects a person with excitement. Someone says Shema with a very passionate voice. So he's declaring the unity of the Creator. Right? And that he means it. So that has an effect on other people. Could be that here the relationship is together with the other people in the minyan. Still, it's you speaking for yourself to the Creator, and then it shouldn't be affected by what's going on around you. Indeed, in the Shulchan Aruch it says that when you're saying the shemone esre, you should. It's almost like a meditative state. It says you should forget where you are. Right? There's only one thing, and that's you're saying it to the Creator. It's sort of like the wide end going out for the touchdown pass, right? What's he thinking about? The ball! Beers after the game? No. Are the cameras rolling to catch it? No. The ball! He's got only one thing in his mind. It's the ball. I've got to catch the ball. So it's that kind of. So if you're saying out loud and other people are saying out loud, and you're sort of conscious of them and interacting with them, that could be very distracting from the consciousness that you're supposed to have. You see, these are good questions. These are the questions you should ask, and prod us to look more deeply and get more answers. Yeah.
Why do you take 3 steps back first before you take 3 steps forward?
Because usually there's no place to go forward from where you are. Taking the 3 steps back backwards just to enable you to be able to walk into the presence that you want to walk into. I don't think there's anything specific about it. And when you take 3 steps back, so you're stepping out of Kodesh Baruch Hu's presence, then when you take 3 steps forward again, that's where you sit. So you go back to where you sit. I don't think there's any more to it than that. Yeah.
Actually, I saw something about the 3 steps forward represents something when Moshe Rabbeinu encountered Hashem. He went through 3 different levels of fog and some other things. I'm not sure.
Yes. In other words, why is it 3 rather than something else? Yes, that I could hear. Right. In other words, you want to symbolize it in a certain way. So the number 3 is a very fundamental number. Yeah, a lot of associations. Right.
And
Yeah.
also, we're on the shemone esre. Why specifically, or I guess, is it okay to document out in the right?
Yes, it's okay, and yes, you have satisfied your obligation, and certainly if you can't get to a minyan, that should not be a reason not to daven. But davening with a minyan is much superior. The reason is a very light pass at the reason why the minyan is superior is this. You notice that all of the prayers, the official text of the prayers is plural. It's never I, it's we. It's the Jewish people. Now, when you come to pray, who are you? I'm taking now from Rav Yosef Soloveitchik, the Bracha, with whom I had privilege of hearing when I was just starting out, lectures that were way above my ability, but I did pick up some things from it. When you have 10 Jews praying together, they form a kind of ambassadorial group where they represent the whole people. So you're not just praying on your own. You're praying in the name of the Jewish people as a whole. And the Kodesh Baruch Hu has a different commitment to the Jewish people as a whole than he has to each individual Jew. He has a much more permanent and much more committed and supportive position vis-a-vis the whole than he has vis-a-vis individuals. So it's a great privilege to be able to pray together with a minyan. Now, I think for men, this entails a certain spiritual struggle and growth, because no minyan prays in the way that is ideal for each of the members in the minyan. It's just not true. And you have to sort of adapt yourself to or tolerate modes of prayer which don't really express who you really are and who you really want to be. But that may be a very important spiritual transformation for you, to mold yourself into that group. I'm a musician. I used to be play a lot, and flute. I play both orchestral and chamber music. Now, it's a big difference when you play in a group than when you play solo. Play solo, you play your part in the most brilliant way possible. When you're playing with a group, you have to meld your voice in with the voices of the other people in the group. And you hear it differently, and you experience it differently. So, and that's also a great deal of music, to be able to meld it together. And by the way, if you think about it, with an orchestra, you have a conductor. With a string quartet, there's no conductor. How do they keep time, the four of them together? There's no conductor. And the answer is each one feels the presence of the other, feels the breathing of the other, feels the body motions of the other, and it's almost like one creature with 4 heads and 8 arms and so forth and so on. You become like one thing. That's a very, very deep element, and the music reflects it. You hear it in the music. Especially if you have the same person, a violinist, who plays sometimes in a quartet, sometimes plays alone, you hear the difference right away. So it looks like the minyan is requiring that also. It's requiring each one of the minyan to sort of bend himself to become part of the group. And that may be a very important spiritual growth element in the way that you relate to a Kodesh Baruch Hu. So davening with the minyan is really, it's very important. I wouldn't say it's the most important, because, and this is a little bit surprising, if you daven at sunrise, then it's preferable to daven alone at sunrise than together with the minyan later, which is quite surprising. Davening at sunrise, I mean, by sunrise you have to be careful what exactly you say at sunrise, to look it up, but that doing it at that time slot is more important than davening with a minyan.
Why is that?
Because it reflects the way the world was created. I mean, I can't do more than that now. But why am I saying this? Because things are complicated. I have a rule: if you ask a question, you get a simple answer, it's wrong, or it's at least misleading. So you have to know there's much more to be said. Yeah.
In relation to the davening with a minyan versus davening alone, and in specifically relation to most people, some people like us who either went off or are coming to becoming more spiritual, becoming more observant, that if you feel a stronger connection or more kavanah davening alone, especially as you get into davening 3 times a day, or just even every day, that is it preferable to daven alone or with a minyan?
With a minyan. There might be extremes, there are some people, I grew up in universities, and I grew up in libraries. They go to base medrash. Everybody's talking all at the same time, and some are yelling and screaming and pounding the table. It takes time to get used to that. The beginning is very unnerving. Okay, so that means for a period of time you're going to lose concentration. You're going to lose lose out. But the goal is to become capable of functioning in those circumstances as well. So the person said, my prayer is destroyed and I can't concentrate at all, and I'm just irritated by what's going on, so then I would say do it twice a week to try to grow into it. But it's definitely just a matter of degree of feeling more connected or less connected. You're better off being there and feeling less connected. You'll grow into feeling more connected, and you're doing the mitzvah, the higher level mitzvah. And at a certain point in life, just the knowledge that you're doing the higher level mitzvah makes you feel more connected. And one way to do this is to talk to a Kodesh Baruch Hu. Talk to him. Ribono Shel Olam, this hurts. This is hard for me. Help me. And carry on a dialogue. I mean, that's definitely a healthy thing to do. Yeah.
This is kind of a silly one, but the chabad yarmulke with the letters on it. I don't know if you're familiar with the phrase. They look kind of sick. I want one. I just want to make sure they're not heretical or problematic.
There are lots of yarmulkes with letters on them, and the kids all have them in different groups. I'm not quite sure which ones.
The Yeshivat one.
Oh, well. I guess the words are vague enough to support various different meanings. But if they are a prayer that the seventh Rebbe of the Chabad movement should live and be well, then it's a problem, because he's dead and buried. Thank you. So they should live and be well. No, that's not appropriate.
What about a non-Nachman Kippa?
There's nothing wrong with that. Now the question is, when you wear clothes to identify yourself to other people. Depends on what you want people to think of you.
What about like a pin that says Mashiach on it?
And no one will believe you're a Mashiach. So maybe that's okay. That would look like it's left over from Purim, I guess. Again, the Mashiach is very subtle. I'm not going to go into that right now. But the idea of wishing that a dead person should live and be well presently because he's still alive, I think that goes beyond the pale. Okay.